Welcome back to Starz Recapped. Today's movie is Walking Against the Rain 2022, a haunting psychological thriller that blurs the line between reality and madness. Set in a bleak, post-apocalyptic world, the story follows two strangers, isolated, broken, and struggling to survive, as their paths slowly begin to intertwine. With eerie atmosphere, emotional depth, and a constant sense of unease, this film explores loneliness, fear, and the desperate human need for connection. So sit back and let's break down this dark and unsettling journey. The world was no longer the place it used to be. Humanity had been pushed to the edge after terrifying creatures descended upon Earth, wiping out cities and silencing once busy streets. Civilization had collapsed, leaving behind nothing but ruins, echoes, and fear. In the middle of this broken world lived a young girl named Blair. She survived alone in an abandoned farmhouse far from any city. Days passed without hearing another human voice. Isolation had become her daily reality. Every morning was about survival, rationing food, staying hidden, and hoping she would live to see another sunrise. One item never left her side, a walkie-talkie. Though it had remained silent for as long as she could remember, Blair still believed someone else might be alive out there. That small device was her last connection to hope. One afternoon, Blair ventured outside to search for supplies. After hours of walking, she stumbled upon a decaying structure that looked like an old emergency shelter. It must have once protected many people during the early days of the invasion, but now it stood empty, broken, and buried in dust. Moving carefully, she stepped inside and searched the dark corners. Her heart lifted when she found a bottle of clean water and some medicine, valuable treasures in this new world. She packed them quickly, but before she could leave, a chilling feeling crept over her. The air felt heavy. It was as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. Fear took over. Blair didn't wait to confirm her suspicion. She sprinted out of the shelter and didn't slow down until she reached the safety of her home. That night, she returned to her quiet routine. Small meals, old books, and long hours staring at her walkie-talkie. Deep down, she refused to believe she was the last human alive. Far away, in another ruined part of the land, a boy named Tommy was fighting his own battle to survive. He had been hiding in a place he believed was secure until the creatures found it. The moment he spotted them, he ran for his life. As he tore through the forest, his backpack slipped from his shoulders and fell to the ground. Inside it were his supplies, food, and tools, everything he needed. He hesitated for a second, but realized stopping would mean death. Choosing life, he kept running. Tommy finally found a shadowed area where he could hide. He stayed there all night, barely breathing, hoping the creatures wouldn't notice him. When morning came, he cautiously returned and recovered his bag. He knew he couldn't stay there anymore. Like Blair, Tommy also carried a walkie-talkie. Desperate, he switched it on and called out, unsure if anyone would answer. This time, fate responded. Blair's device crackled to life. For both of them, it was a moment they would never forget. The sound of another human voice after endless silence. Tommy explained that he was trapped on top of a tall, arrow-shaped structure while the creatures roamed below. Blair recognized the place immediately. She remembered a hidden window along the side of the structure and quickly shared the information. She guided him step by step, telling him how to reach it without being seen. Trusting her voice, Tommy followed the plan. He reached the window, climbed out, and escaped unnoticed. Because of Blair's courage and quick thinking, a life was saved. And in a world ruled by monsters, two strangers found something stronger than fear: hope. When morning arrived, Tommy carefully returned to the place he had fled from the night before. He recovered the rest of his supplies, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and switched on his walkie-talkie. His first message was for Blair. He told her he was safe and on the move again. Hearing his voice filled Blair with relief. She smiled for the first time in days and told him how comforting it felt to finally speak to another person after surviving in silence for so long. Curious about her situation, Tommy asked where she was staying. Blair explained that she had been living alone in an abandoned house far from civilization. It wasn't comfortable, but it kept her hidden from the creatures and from dangerous humans. She admitted that fear had kept her from traveling too far beyond its walls. Tommy then shared his idea. He spoke about a distant mountain peak, towering high above the ruined land. Before everything fell apart, his family had lived near that place. He believed the height and isolation might make it safer, maybe even untouched by the monsters below. Blair felt a spark of hope. She was exhausted from hiding and loneliness, and the thought of leaving her empty house filled her with courage. Without hesitation, she told Tommy she wanted to join him and reach the mountain together. But there was a problem. Blair noticed the blinking light on her walkie-talkie. The battery was nearly drained. She warned Tommy that they would need to limit their conversations to just a few short check-ins each day to conserve power. They agreed, knowing every word now mattered. With a shared goal in mind, both of them prepared for the journey ahead. Blair packed what little she owned, ready to leave her shelter behind. Tommy turned toward the distant peaks and began walking. As the days passed, hunger became a constant struggle for Tommy. His food supply was small, and he resisted the urge to eat it all at once. He understood that surviving meant patience. Every step forward was a test of discipline. Blair faced her own challenges along the way. She searched through abandoned homes, quietly checking old kitchens for anything edible. The houses were empty and silent, reminders of a world that no longer existed. She moved carefully, knowing even a small sound could attract danger. Her journey showed how much she had changed. She hunted a rabbit for food, then later caught a fish from a nearby stream. She cooked what she found over an open fire, doing whatever it took to stay strong. Inside one forgotten house, Blair discovered a pair of headphones. When she played them, music filled her ears. In a world ruled by silence and fear, those songs became her comfort. For a little while, the loneliness faded, and she kept moving forward, guided by hope and the promise of the mountain. As Tommy continued down the empty road, he came across a rusted, abandoned bus lying sideways near the highway. For a moment, he considered searching it. Vehicles like this sometimes had food or supplies, but the instant he peered through the cracked window, an eerie sound echoed from the rear of the bus. It was low, unnatural, and terrifying. Fear took control. Tommy didn't wait to investigate. He backed away quietly, then ran until he found a spot where he could sit and catch his breath. Once his hands stopped shaking, he reached for his walkie-talkie and called Blair. She answered quickly and asked if he had eaten anything yet. Tommy admitted that he hadn't. Blair warned him to be careful and reminded him that abandoned houses were his best chance to find food, but only if he stayed completely silent. One mistake, she said, could cost him his life. As the conversation continued, Tommy asked a question that felt strangely hopeful. If they both survived and finally met, where would she want to go next? Blair paused before answering. Then she spoke softly. She said she had always dreamed of living in New York City. It was something her family talked about often, a future they never got the chance to reach. Her voice cracked as she explained that her father had died before their dream could come true. All she had left of him now was a single old photograph. Tommy shared his own story. He said he wasn't anyone special, just a survivor holding onto one memory, his father's necklace, which he kept close at all times. It reminded him to keep going. After his father died, Tommy scattered his ashes into the ocean. If he lived through this nightmare, he wanted to return there someday and say goodbye properly. Blair listened in silence. When she finally spoke, she noticed how dark it had become. She told Tommy to find food and shelter and suggested they talk again at exactly 9 that night. Blair continued walking and soon reached an old church. Inside, the building was empty and still, except for a strange woman standing near the altar. The woman spoke in an unsettling tone, claiming the creatures were a punishment sent by God for humanity's sins. Blair snapped. Anger surged through her as she shouted back, saying that no true God would abandon innocent people to die. No parent would watch their children be torn apart and do nothing. Furious and shaken, Blair stormed out of the church and disappeared into the night. Elsewhere, Tommy entered an empty house in search of food. After carefully searching the rooms, he finally found something to eat. Relief washed over him, but it didn't last. As he turned to leave, a creature stood directly in his path. Terror froze him for a split second before he ran. He didn't get far. His foot caught on debris, and he fell hard to the ground. Within moments, the creature loomed over him. Tommy was sure this was the end, but instead of attacking, the creature simply stared at him. After a long, horrifying pause, it turned and walked away. Tommy couldn't believe it. Shaking uncontrollably, he fled and hid until he felt safe. His heart raced as he grabbed his walkie-talkie and contacted Blair, explaining that a creature had nearly killed him, but didn't. Blair was stunned. She told him no one ever survived an encounter like that. Tommy's voice broke. He confessed that when the invasion began, the creatures killed his entire family, his parents and his sister. He had been left completely alone. Tears streamed down his face as he admitted he didn't even know why he was still living. Blair spoke gently, urging him not to give up. She told him that he was still alive for a reason, and that he had to stay strong, not just for himself, but for her too. She reminded him that his father would never want him to surrender to despair. They promised each other they would keep going and meet at the mountain. That night, Blair found a wrecked car by the roadside and curled up inside to sleep. Far away, Tommy found shelter of his own, lit a small fire, and rested under the dark sky, both of them clinging to hope in a world that had almost forgotten it. Morning light crept in as Blair slowly opened her eyes. She was still inside the broken car when something outside caught her attention. Standing just beyond the window was one of the creatures. Her body went completely still. Before she could react, the monster slammed into the car, shattering the glass. Blair forced herself to move. She scrambled out just as the creature leaped toward her. Acting on pure instinct, she grabbed a sharp shard from the broken window and struck back with everything she had. After a desperate struggle, the creature collapsed. The fight drained her completely. Blair sank to the ground, trembling, and finally broke down in tears. She was exhausted emotionally and physically. Every day felt like a battle she might not survive. After a while, she wiped her face, took a deep breath, and reached for her walkie-talkie. She contacted Tommy and told him what had happened. What scared her most wasn't the attack, it was the timing. She explained that the creatures used to appear only after dark, but this one had struck in broad daylight. That meant they were changing, learning, becoming even more dangerous. Tommy shared her fear. He urged her to keep moving faster and told her he could reach the mountain summit in less than 2 days. If there was any chance of surviving, they had to get there quickly. As Blair continued walking, panic threatened to overwhelm her. Her heart raced, her thoughts spiraled, and she felt like she might lose control. Over the radio, she begged Tommy to keep talking about anything, just so she wouldn't feel alone. Hearing his calm voice helped steady her nerves and pull her back from fear. Not long after, Blair reached an abandoned railway line. She sat down for a moment, pulled out her camera, and took a few photographs. In a world filled with death and silence, she wanted proof that she was still human, that she was still alive. Meanwhile, Tommy entered another deserted house. To his surprise, several horses were still inside, alive but restless. As he explored the building, a young girl suddenly appeared. She looked dangerously thin, clearly starving. She demanded his bag, threatening to kill him if he refused. Tommy felt sympathy for her, but he knew he couldn't give it up. That bag held his food, his tools, his chance to live. When he said no, the girl screamed in rage. Her screams echoed through the house. Within seconds, the noise drew one of the creatures. The girl panicked and screamed even louder. Tommy hid as the monster rushed in and attacked her. There was nothing he could do. She was killed instantly. Horrified, Tommy fled the house and ran until his lungs burned. Once he felt safe, he tried calling Blair to warn her, but there was no response. He assumed her radio might be off. What he didn't know was that Blair, too, was walking straight into danger. Not long after leaving the railway tracks, Blair sensed danger again. A creature burst out in front of her, cutting off every possible escape. With nowhere left to run, she prepared herself for another fight. Before the monster could strike, a sudden gunshot echoed through the air. An elderly man stepped forward, holding a weapon. With calm precision, he brought the creature down. Blair stood frozen, shocked but alive. The man gently guided her away from the road and took her to his nearby home. Inside the small house, he cleaned her wound, wrapped it carefully, and placed a warm cup of tea in her hands. Blair finally asked the question that had been weighing on her mind: why he had risked his life to save her. The old man smiled quietly and replied that helping her was simply the only choice he could make. When Blair asked if he lived alone, his expression softened. He told her his wife had once been with him, but the creatures had taken her. He had survived, but she had not. Now, he said, he found some comfort knowing she was no longer suffering in that cruel world. Later, Blair switched on her walkie-talkie and contacted Tommy. She told him about the old man who had saved her life. Tommy grew cautious and warned her not to trust strangers so easily, reminding her of the woman who had attacked him earlier. People, he said, were becoming just as dangerous as the creatures. Blair disagreed. She explained that the old man had every chance to walk away, but instead he chose to help her and share his food. People like him were rare now. She told Tommy that if they survived, she dreamed of living somewhere quiet, on a farm far from fear and violence. As the conversation continued, Blair shared a painful memory from her past. She told Tommy about the night a creature attacked her and her mother while they slept. Her mother had begged her to escape, but Blair couldn't leave her behind. Watching her suffer was unbearable. With only one bullet left in her gun, Blair made the hardest choice of her life and ended her mother's pain. Her voice broke as she cried. Tommy spoke gently, telling her she had acted out of love, not cruelty. Letting someone suffer, he said, would have been far worse. The old man, whose name was James, had overheard the story. He told Blair that what she did required immense strength, and not everyone could make such a decision. Before she left, James packed a bag full of food and water and handed it to her. He told her to head north, where her friend was waiting. He also reminded her that his home would always be open to her. He admitted he didn't expect to live much longer, but the house would be hers if she ever needed shelter again. Blair thanked him and continued her journey. Elsewhere, Tommy sat quietly, finishing the last of his food. Suddenly, movement stirred in the darkness. A creature attacked without warning. Tommy fought back desperately, spotting a large stone nearby. He grabbed it and struck the creature with all his strength. The monster collapsed and didn't move again. Breathing heavily, Tommy reached for his walkie-talkie, but the battery had died. At the same time, Blair tried to contact him, only to realize her radio was silent as well. With no way to communicate, both of them continued moving forward alone. Eventually, Tommy reached a small, empty house and collapsed inside to rest. When morning came, a knock echoed through the door. He opened it slowly, and there stood Blair. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then relief washed over them. Against all odds, they had survived. And, at last, they were no longer alone. After months of isolation, fear, and constant survival, they were finally no longer alone. Blair and Tommy stood together, holding onto each other as if letting go might make the moment disappear. They talked for hours, sharing stories, pain, and quiet laughter. For the first time in a long while, the world didn't feel completely broken. They chose to remain in a small house and dreamed of rebuilding a life, one shaped by trust, not fear. But peace never lasted in this new world. Without warning, two creatures appeared outside the house, moving toward it under the bright daytime sky. Blair peered through the window, her face pale. She realized the truth immediately. The creatures were no longer waiting for night. Time was running out. As panic spread, Tommy spotted several gas tanks stacked in a corner. A desperate plan formed in his mind. If they released the gas and trapped the creatures inside, fire could end the threat once and for all. Working quickly, they opened the valves. Moments later, the door shattered as the creatures forced their way in. Blair and Tommy lit the flame and sprinted through the back exit. The explosion was massive. Fire swallowed the house, along with the creatures inside it. They stood at a distance, watching the flames rise, knowing they had lost their shelter, but not their will to survive. Tommy broke the silence, saying that homes could always be rebuilt as long as they were still alive. Just then, the ground trembled. A deep, terrifying roar echoed from the mountains. Slowly, they looked up, and their hope turned to dread. Standing atop the distant peak was something far worse than anything they had faced before. A massive creature, towering over the land, watching everything below. Blair and Tommy exchanged a glance. Fear was written on their faces, but so was determination. The danger ahead was greater than ever, but this time, they weren't facing it alone, and that was enough. The story ends here. In a world ruled by fear and monsters, hope survives as long as people stand together. If you enjoyed this movie recap, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us bring more exciting stories like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next recap on Starz Recapped.